Good afternoon, sisters and brothers, all genders and identities. My name is Yvonne Weldon. I am a Wiradjuriwoman from Cowra here in New South Wales. From the waters of the Clare, which later became known as the Lachlan, and of the Murrumbidgee Rivers. I am a representative of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, who are the culture authority under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act for the land this place stands on. I would like to pay my respects to all elders, past and present, to all First Nations, to you and the ancestors of the lands that you've travelled from. The boundaries of our traditional owners are not defined by handmade lines, but through the natural landscapes of the earth. The Eora Nation's country covers the Hawkes River in the north, the Nepean in the west, and the Georges River in the south. On behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, the elders and the members, I welcome everyone to the lands of the Gadigal. I acknowledge the Gadigal people whose spirits and ancestors will always remain with this land, our Mother Earth. As we're joined here today, let us all honour the lives we have all lost, those we need to help and we need to save. And every one of you being here, you all have an important role in changing what cannot be accepted. We have lost far too many lives. Please continue to make positive change. My people, Aboriginal people, have lived our history and our future in all our traditions and all our practices. This lived future was determined by our past. Our lessons were passed on from one generation to the next. For 236 years, the lessons haven't all been from our continual history, but rather an introduced one, where someone else's normal has become something we eventually accepted and normalised too. Things that were done to us were then repeated. As we move through the changes from our world to yours to be ours together, our traditions are still practiced in this contemporary place, but it's now shared with so many other nations, the hundreds from this continent and hundreds from across the globe. So whether you come here by foot, air or water, we welcome you, we include you. But remember, if you do it the way of the First Nations people, it will be done for everyone. So as you connect, learn and share, today, tomorrow and beyond, don't live regretting what we should have done, but create the legacy of what must be done. Our future is only as good as our history, and we have the world's strongest, continuous living one on this land. Reflect upon the footsteps we are all leaving to know where we're heading, shaping a world, hopefully a country we can be proud of. The truth needs to be told and must be heard if we are to walk together. So join me by learning from the ancient and lived teachings of this land's first people. Speak up loudly, but listen too. All of our lives depend on it. Together, we can make a difference. So let us all draw upon my people's spirits as we continue on our journey. May my people's spirits walk with you and guide you as we strive forward for us all. Again, on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, Ninyini, Nala, Wongan, Mari, Bajari, Gadi, Nurda, welcome to Gadigal. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Yvonne. Welcome, everybody. My name is Madeline Jane Lobsey. I'm going to be hosting for today, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge who is in the room. In the room today are experts. In the room today are warriors. In the room today are survivors. In the room today are people who give their heart and their soul and their time to champion people. In the room today are champions. and there are people doing extraordinary things in the community. So I want to take a moment to just acknowledge who's in the room today and to connect with one another in this very extraordinary occasion for the Kathleen York House. I want to let you know some basics. So the bathrooms are out the back and to the right. If you need to go, you're welcome to go. Whenever you need to go, no hands required. Okay? Go whenever you need to go. There's also water and tea and coffee out there if you need to grab a drink. We will be having a series of people speaking. We're also going to have a moment where we get to experience some music therapy, which will be wonderful. There will be an actual break in the middle. And then we'll be having some nibbles and completing all together. So that's what's going to happen today. Okay. I would like to also let you know that there was an envelope on your seat as you walked in. So inside it is a piece of paper. Sometimes when there's amazing people here, either everybody gets too scared to ask a question or there are too many questions. So we have a piece of paper in there. If you want to write down a question later on for Jane Caro or for Jessica Hill, you're welcome to do that, and then we'll make sure that those questions get answered later on. All right, I would like to welcome Kobe Sheedy. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I would first like to just start by thanking Yvonne for your wonderful welcome. It's always a pleasure to hear you welcome us to country. I too would like to acknowledge that we are here today on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. This land is, was and always will be Aboriginal land. And I'd like to extend that welcome to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people we have here with us today. Kathleen York House in Glebe is a fantastic local service. We are so incredibly lucky to have the service in our community. They're there helping to rehabilitate and support women who are working to overcome substance abuse and dependence and reduce its negative impact on their lives. It's one of a few services of its kind where women seeking treatment can stay with their children and their babies in safe, welcoming and home-like environment. And we really know that we're so lucky to have somewhere like it where women can stay connected to their children. Operating in the Inner West since 1991, Kathleen York House have supported scores of women to return to independent living with a higher quality of life for themselves and their families. The work that they do is absolutely essential. In particular, I want to acknowledge Dr. Latha Nithyanandam, I hope I got that right, who is the CEO of Alcohol and Drug Foundation New South Wales. And thank you for all that you do at Kathleen York House and for organising this really important symposium here to bring us all together, as well as board members and staff who work at Kathleen York House. We know that the staff are the glue that hold this work together, and it is often a very thankless sector to be working in, and we are so appreciative to have you and for all the love and care that you put into your work every day. It does not go unnoticed. I understand today we also have several members of the Alcohol and Drug Foundation Board, including Vice President Carolyn Day, Directors Janet Dawson and Graham Yates, as well as several members of the passionate staff team at Kathleen York House, including Melissa Holmes, Paula Majorano, Libby Shipway, Jetta Yates and Jennifer Stepanek. We also have representatives here from other critical services across the Balmain electorate, including, I haven't seen you, Dr. Sess Salmon here from Leichhardt Community Women's Health Centre, and Sharon Todd Miller. That's another fantastic local organisation that we have in our community helping local women. And I'm so grateful to all of you who have been here to join us today. We're really fortunate to have so many passionate and supportive people helping women in need in our community. So thank you again for all that you do. We are, as I said, very grateful to have Kathleen York House in our community. I want to acknowledge the members of Parliament that will be joining us. Please don't be put off by people running in and out of the theaterette. We have a busy sitting day ahead of us, and people will come and join hopefully over the next few hours when they have an opportunity to come and listen to this really important speakers and to meet some of you hopefully at the break time. So it is a very busy Equality Day, the Honourable Jodie Harrison, Minister for Women, Minister for Seniors and Minister for the Prevention of Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault is hoping to get here today, as is the Shadow Minister for Women, the Shadow Minister for the Prevention of Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, Leslie Williams. So hopefully they will be here at some point today, and I just want to acknowledge my colleague Jenny Leong, who's here as well from the Greens. Now, we know that there is a lot more work to be done, and it has been welcome to see some of the steps that have been taken in these last couple of weeks for increased funding for domestic and family violence shelters, and we know that much more of that kind of funding is needed. There's such a powerhouse of people here today, so it's wonderful to welcome you, and it's such an important time to be having this symposium in the midst of what we've seen as an elevated discussion, a long overdue discussion about violence against women, which has really come about with some really high profile and terrible deaths in recent times in New South Wales. And while it's been horrible to see this happen, it's been a positive to see that there is actually finally this important discussion happening. And we know that the issues that are being raised around domestic violence and family violence are interlinked. We know that housing insecurity, homelessness, drug and alcohol addiction, poverty, gambling, mental health issues, and domestic and family violence and intergenerational trauma are all these connected issues. They're not things that exist in silos. They're all part of this big complex problem that we're facing in our society, and our communities across New South Wales need us to be more creative when we think about solving these challenges. We don't want to see governments looking at domestic and family violence and thinking that they just solve domestic and family violence by looking at that on its own. We know that services like Kathlean York House, where women are dealing with drug and alcohol addiction, we know the importance of keeping families together. All of these issues need to be looked at as a whole, and our community really deserves that. So we know how critical this work happening at Kathlean York House is. The importance of keeping children together with their mothers while they're getting treatment is just something that can't be understated. I think too often we see women having to choose between getting the help and support that they need and being able to stay with their children. So I've got 3 young kids in primary school. They're 7, 9 and 11, and I can't imagine the heart-rending decision it must be for women who don't have the opportunity to stay in a facility like Kathlean York House, where they can remain with their kids and have to choose to be somewhere else so that they can get the help that they need. So we would really love to see more of it across this state. And I have spoken with Latha and some of the board members about their vision to expand their services to another facility, because we know that the need goes far beyond the inner west of Sydney, and that Kathlean York House is making such an important impact in our community. We would really love to see your services expand so that other people can get access to something so fantastic. So I hope that you all enjoy this afternoon. As was said, there will be a break in the middle, and please come and go if you need to use the bathrooms. Members, as I said, will be coming in and out like myself, so I'll be popping in and out in between parliamentary business. Many of you are already working in this space. You are the experts, you are the people on the front lines, you are the people doing the hard work that we all depend upon so greatly. And I encourage you to take some time this afternoon to celebrate the importance of your work and how much you have achieved. I'm sure that sometimes it feels like you're just pushing shit up a hill to try and get this stuff done and to look after people and get the work done that you need and get the funding that you need, and it must be incredibly exhausting. So I just want you to take some time this afternoon to really celebrate what you have done and what the work that you do and how important it is to so many in our community, and how important it is to improve lives across the state. I look forward to working with all of you and with my parliamentary colleagues to deliver these much needed services by making sure that the needs of women who are struggling with a range of issues, from homelessness to domestic violence to addiction and beyond, are at the front of mind for governments and decision makers. So thank you all again for taking the afternoon to join us. Have a wonderful afternoon.
I love that you're running in and out. It makes it very real. It makes it real, you know, that there's real things happening that we're really standing for in rooms very close to us. So we appreciate everything you have to do to be able to do that. You wanted to do that now? Yeah. Excellent. Go ahead. Thank you so much. All right, well, I would love to be able to welcome up Lata, who I know many of you know, so please welcome her to talk to you about Kathleen York House.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, dear colleagues, and KYH family, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land, the Gadigal people, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future. I don't know what to say because I think Kobi Shetty has said it all about what we do. But I just want to say how I've been here for 11 years immersed in this field. And working at ADAC, I came across a lot of people with intellectual disability, also having intersection with substance use disorders. And when I was working with them, KYH beckoned me, and here I stand today, humbled by the privilege to serve. When we first thought about the seminar, there was a lot of this way and this way. We didn't know what to call the seminar, what is the title. And first we thought, the journey of becoming. And then it was many people, most of our staff felt, oh, that's the name of Michelle Obama's name, Becoming, so we can't be choosing it. We never thought about it, but then that's it. But then a couple of weeks back, we had a meeting, a rendezvous with our ex-clients, and then with Jane Caro. And one of the ex-old clients, she just started with, my journey of becoming began. And we thought, that's a sign. That's what we need to have as our title. So that's how we went. Now let me introduce Kathleen York House. I know most of you know what we do, but then, very briefly, it stands as a beacon of hope for 7 residential rehabilitation for women, offering space and a therapeutic haven for both the women and the children. We embrace women, all kind of from all wakes of life. So it is admitting single women, women with children, pregnant women, mothers, homelessness, people who don't have a home, or also for people from the First Nations and clients from called backgrounds. We prioritize First Nations women and pregnant women. Our approach is eclectic, weaving evidence-based interventions into a holistic tapestry that addresses the biopsychosocial and spiritual needs. Our structured program spans 6 months, tailored to each individual's journey. Though it is structured, it is also individualized because everybody comes with different needs. For those who embark on a long 1-year aftercare program, we stand steadfast supporting their transition back into the society with housing, taking up some kind of education or the other so that they can become employable, or even, taking up some kind of voluntary job or being actively working at some place by the end of their 18 months period. Pregnant women are supported right through pregnancy and after birth with their parenting skills. We work closely with other agencies like SubSteam at RPA. We have some of them here, as well as Tricillian and other collaborative services such as community health clinics. We facilitate visitations and work for restoration of care for children. For many women, we do not shy away from approaching the delicate topic of contraception, making women aware that pregnancy is a choice and to be aware of preventative measures. At Kathleen York House, we are proud to say that that's one of the outcomes that, we make sure that we are monitoring. Today, I'm proud to say many of our women are doing extremely well and have reintegrated back into the community. And I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating. You're going to listen to 3 of the women who are happy to come and share their journeys. One of the things KYH is proud is the focus shown not only on the women, but also on their children. How could we ignore the children who are arguably exposed to the same nature of domestic violence, trauma, and neglect that the mothers have been? it seemed the most natural and intuitive aspect for us to do something about it. We were not ready to allow limited funding to come in the way of providing support to children, because we are very clear that, time lost is time lost. So we've been introducing play therapy, sand therapy for some of our kids, and have found very good outcomes. So these are all what's happening. But the current struggle, I think, when I'm talking about our celebrations, I also have to talk about the current struggle that we are facing. Suddenly, in the last few years, we are facing a big issue. There are no detox beds for women with children in New South Wales. And so every time we have women calling in from hospitals or women with children, there is no detox beds for them to go to. So that is a big struggle. We are managing somehow with DCJ support, but then for those there's no DCJ support, it's next to impossible to do something. We are trying, as usual, Kathlean York House is quite a nimble service where we try to do what best we can do. So we have been trying management in the community and things like that, but it's not really working. It's a big, difficult task, and I think that's something, I think I have to bring to everybody's notice. I think everyone knows about it, but this is a big struggle for us. And now coming back to the celebration, I think, the success of KYH is directly because of the staff. At this symposium, I wish to acknowledge the struggles faced by healthcare workers in the noble and challenging task of caring for people with substance use disorders and complex trauma, and especially for women also. Here, our commitment extends beyond rehabilitation. It encompasses the well-being of the heartbeat of our community, that is our staff. Their tireless dedication fuels our success, and in return, we prioritize their mental and emotional health. Regular debriefings, supervision, and ample leave, notably more than the industry award and peers, ensure our staff stand resilient against the weight of vicarious trauma. But all this is possible only because we have a very, very supportive and committed board. We have subcommittees where all the board members give so much of their time to support Kathleen York House. Like Martin Luther King Jr. says, I would like to say on behalf of the board and the family of Kathleen York House, we have a big vision, or rather dream. Because we do what we do well and we offer such niche services, we wish to duplicate this service in southwestern Sydney and in other places. Thank you, Kobe, for recognizing that. Thank you very much. And the other thing which you're also looking at is during COVID and even otherwise, we realize that many times we get urgent phone calls from DCJ or even from our hospitals saying that there are pregnant women or women who have just delivered, and if they don't go into rehab immediately, they might be losing their children and things like that. So that's always, it's difficult for us to, accommodate all the women, and we know they are waitlisted in various places. So one of the other dreams we have is to offer a respite care service for DCJ clients with substance use disorders, so that decision to remove the child from care does not have to be taken urgently, and the women can have interventions till they go to another rehab or till informed decisions are taken. These are two business projects we have, and we've been having this vision. We might be a small service, but then, we have lofty dreams. We envision a future where urgent phone calls for immediate intervention becomes obsolete and would help take the pressure off the traditional healthcare system, even if it's a small way. I have put out our wish, dream, vision out there, and I hope the planet aligns them. And also all the people out here. Today, as I stand before you, I echo the sentiments of our clients, the real heroes of this journey. Their stories, their resilience, and their transformation speak volumes about the impact of Kathleen York House. So I invite you to listen, to truly hear the voices, and to join us in our quest to turn our dreams into reality. Every individual that stands here today has not only made an impact or been impacted by our service, but has the potential to bring significant positive change to our future and the future of Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lata. Both the universe and all of us heard your dream. Occasionally you're going to hear a little alarm. Don't worry, that's just telling the politicians to get back in, okay? So it doesn't mean anything else, so don't worry about that. All right, we really do have a privilege now. It's true, the real heroes are going to speak, so we're going to hear from some of the people who have participated in the services of Kathleen York House, and I would like to welcome the amazing, in fact, we'll all just come over this side and then we'll take turns, okay? So I'd love to welcome Jessie and Angeline and Becky, if you could please come over here. So Jessie, you're going to go first. Come up here. We got you. As long as you're anywhere near the microphone, it works. Okay? Okay. And do you want some water?
Thank you.
There you go. There you go.
Is it nerve-wracking at all?
No. No. Just close your eyes if you need to. Okay. All right.
Hi, my name's Jessie. I went into Kathleen York House in October 2019. I was in there for, I think, 6 months of residential and then 18 months of aftercare. I wanted desperately to get into Kathleen York House. I rang twice a week for a few months. And then once I got there, I thought, what have I done? I didn't know what, I actually don't know what I expected. I thought maybe I'd go in there, they'd find me a house. And then maybe if I had a house, because I'd been homeless on and off for about 2 years, then maybe the other issues might go away. That was honestly what I thought when I got in there. And it turns out you actually have to do a little bit of work. But the thing is about the work that you do at Kathleen York is that it makes you realise that you're actually worth working on. I didn't have any self-worth when I got in there, none. I remember saying to my case manager, how do you get self-esteem? And she said, you have to do esteemable things. And I'm like, I don't know what they are. It was so hard, but so worthwhile. And I remember one of the things that was, I'll never forget this actually, because I was reflecting on this last night. I remember a staff member saying to me that the one thing that nobody can take away from you is education. And being in a position where I'd had everything taken away from me, I thought if I can just learn and I can get the skills here that I need, then I can move on with my life and nobody can ever take that away from me. And it's hard to talk about because it was such a tricky time, but like I wouldn't have thought 5 years ago I'd be standing up here today. You know, I couldn't even leave the house. You know, I couldn't leave the house unless it was dark. And I just, you know, they joke about, you know, recovery being the life of your wildest dreams, and it really is, because you can get up every day and face the world and not hide away from things. Like I came into Kathleen York so full of fear and so full of rage, and I really was encouraged to, you know, explore that and figure out who I was, what I wanted, because I was so disconnected from that. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say except that I now work in the sector and I'm in the unenviable position of turning women away every single day that need help. And I will always speak up for women's services. Anytime anyone needs me to speak, I will, because it's so important. And, you know, we take over 200 phone calls a day sometimes, and it's just the help isn't there. And there's nothing harder than saying, I'm sorry, we can't help you. There is nothing harder, and more services like this need to exist so we can help the people that are reaching out, because the hardest part is asking for help, but to ask for help and be turned away, it's just, you never know if someone's going to ask for help again. So it's so important. So thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Angeline. I'm a recovering drug addict. I went to Kathleen York House in 2016. I spent 15 months there. It was the worst but the best time of my life. As the previous speaker said, I had to work hard, and I had to wake up every morning knowing that Kathleen York House was going to be there to help me and support me. I went to Kathleen York House completely broken. I just wanted to die. Kathleen York House took me out of a psych ward and I went there that day. And Kathleen York House taught me how to become a human again, how to live life on life's terms. Kathleen York House gave me a roof over my head and the tools to live every day. I spent the last few days just kind of reminiscing about my journey in recovery and seeing where I have come from and where I am today. And they say that recovery gives you a new life, and that's what it's given me. It hasn't dusted my old life. It's given me a brand new life, and that's what Kathleen York House did to me, like has given to me. They gave me the tools to breathe again, you know. They gave me the tools to... I came from homeless. I was living in my car and I was basically doing whatever I can to get high, to get drugs, you know. And Kathleen York House gave me the tools to have a shower again, you know, to be able to read again, to be able to have hope. They did so many different classes there, different therapy types, all from meditation in the mornings to gym, which I hated at that time. I still hate. But it gave me that grounding, you know, where I have a foundation. They taught us things like DBT, where we got to learn to deal with our emotions without drugs and alcohol, without causing harm to like myself. And yeah, they you know that, I'm not sure what it's called, but it's a Japanese tradition where you have a broken vessel or a vase and you use gold to make it better. Like you make... Kathleen York House is that gold. I came as a broken vessel and now, like one day at a time, I am truly becoming of value. They taught me how to go back to school. I'm still studying. And I'm doing volunteer work. I've got married to a beautiful husband who's also in recovery. I have a dog. I've travelled, you know, and these are things that to normal people are just there. But for me, it's a true gift. And that gift was because of Latha, because of the case workers there, because of the different organisations that they're connected to. They connected me to this group that work with adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And I still go to that program till this very day, 7 years later. And it's people like that that, just like create such an amazing life for me and for the amazing women here and the amazing children that get to be with their mothers, you know, and that are not punished by, because that they're addicts, you know, and by the people in the justice system, you know. Kathleen York House just has helped me so much, and I'm so grateful that they asked me to be here. So I'm just going to leave it there. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Becky. I was in Kathleen York House from 2019, April 2019, and I completed the 6 months course there, or term there, and then I did the 12 months aftercare as well. And I was very eager to get into Kathleen York House. I did Jarrah House 10 weeks prior to that, and I was told that I needed to do another 6 months, and I had a few options, and I just really had a good feeling about KYH, and I really wanted to get in there because it was in Glebe, and I love Glebe. And I had my son at 6 days old taken away from me from DCJ, and I went into KYH just like a shell of a woman. I don't want to get emotional. Like, I have every time I talk about this, it's just like really a traumatic time for me. And KYH just like held me and supported me the whole way through to get my son back. And I got him back on May 22nd, and I was so happy when I walked into KYH and there was a little cot in my room. And I was just so happy to be there. I was just like, cool, I'm here. And Libby, you were there, and we went through my bags and everything, and we went through everything and had all this stuff. And I was just so happy to be there. It was just such a cozy, a beautiful building. Like, I just loved the area, and yeah, I just loved to arrive there. And I thought that was my biggest problem, you know, like I just had to get my son back. And then I got my son back, and then the other things started coming out, you know, like the addiction. And I started, I've got to actually work on myself while I'm in here. It's not just about me getting my son back. And it really exposed me. And one of the things Kathleen York House taught me was life skills and consequences. I did break the rules once at KYH, and, you know, instead of kicking me to the curb, they you know, held me accountable. And throughout all my life, being on drugs and drinking, I just ran away from my problems. I'm not dealing with that. But, you know, I had to stay there, and they made me write out this descriptive, like what my thoughts were, and this huge piece of paper, and I had to write all this stuff out. It just took me ages. But it helped, like it really, really helped. Like now, even to this day, I was like, why did I do that? And I'll think back to that, because it was really hard for me to do, like, because you don't want to face things, you know, when you're not used to facing things. You're just like, I don't care, I'm just going to go take drugs and have a good time. So it was a time in my life when I really had to like face myself and be accountable for how I had completely destroyed my life. And yeah, I was a shell of a person. I didn't think I was at the time, but looking back, like I thought I was confident and, you know, everyone else was wrong. But yeah, looking back, I really needed the help. And the women there, the staff there, were just so welcoming and caring and just nice, you know, like I really needed that. Didn't have a strong relationship with women. It was always male. Like with drugs and alcohol, I was just like, yeah, always seeking male approval. That's another story. But yeah, so it was good to like form good bonds with other women. And they just supported me with the court processes, with getting my son back, and oh my God, just with everything, like with my spending, like my addiction would manifest in other ways, you know, and I'd spend heaps of money at all the shops, and me and Jenny went into the room and I was so nervous because we were going to talk about my spending, and like she's asking me like what I was thinking, like why I was buying that. And one of the major ones was like, I need to have it now. But just little things like that will come into my head when I'm shopping even to this day. Like I'll be like, you don't need to have that now. Like, remember that? Like, you know, it's like a subconscious sort of thing, but just little life skills like that. Like even getting up and doing the chores. Like I never got up and did chores. I just did whatever I wanted and just got drugs and had a good time and partied and ruined my life. I was homeless. Partied till I was homeless. So yeah, those life skills really stuck. And if you do it for 6 months and then you do it for another 12 months in aftercare, it really sets the tone. Like they set me up in a brilliant trajectory in life. I needed it at that time. That's exactly what I needed at that time too. Like to look at myself, be accountable, you know, accept my consequences, you know, because, you know, you like to place the blame a lot. And they really exposed me and taught me about self-esteem as well, was a big one, because I thought I was confident and apparently I wasn't. I had really low self-esteem, low self-love. And I can say today that I'm so much better at looking after myself. And I think you were talking about it as well, DBT. That was the best. The emotional regulation, fact-checking. What was the other one? There's another one. I haven't done it for so long. But all that stuff was just like so helpful. And what was another thing that we used to do? That art therapy was great. I love art therapy. It was a really great creative outlet. We did the brain course. That was great, you know, actually seeing what happens to our brain when we're on drugs, and it was really interesting. And there was, just lots of different groups and therapies that we did. And just getting up in the morning, like getting up in the morning, doing the chores, that was a big one for me because I didn't do what anyone told me to do, but I was determined to finish because it was unfathomable for me to give up. So I was very willing. You got to be able to be willing. You got to want to do it. And there was a couple of other choices I could have gone to, like with the rehabs. They were a little bit more lenient, They let you smoke cigarettes. They let you out a bit more. You could just like it was a lot more lenient. And I was like, no, I don't think I need that. I don't know why I thought that, but I was like, I've got to go to KYH because they're a little bit stricter, but in a good way, not like withholding or anything, but just because you need that. You need to be, put into line a little bit. So, forever grateful. I still live in the area. I work at public school just down the street, and I walk past Kathleen York House every day. I don't know if you see me, but I'm like, hi, when I see the window. And I just always get a warm feeling whenever I think about Kathleen York House and give props to them. They're just like amazing group of women. Service. Thank you.
Well, there's not much to say after that, is there? It's pretty extraordinary. So we have some flowers for you. So if you wanted to hand out the flowers to each person, these are staff from Kathleen York House. So Libby for Jessie and Jetta for Angeline and Jennifer for Becky. Otherwise known as Paula. It's pretty amazing, isn't it, to think about life before and life after sometimes. There's those critical times in life where it really does feel like there's life before and there's life after. And I know that they said it, but I hope you all heard that that's not possible without all of the work that you do. And sometimes it gets spoken in sort of fancy places like this, but most of the time it's not. It's in small rooms and quiet places and, dark night phone calls and all of those places. So we just really do want to acknowledge you for the extraordinary work that you do. Speaking of extraordinary work, I'd like to introduce Dr. Teresa Anderson, who's the Chief Executive of Sydney Local Health, and they will be coming to speak for us now. Go ahead. Please welcome Teresa.
Well, my goodness, it is hard to talk after those beautiful stories. It is a great privilege to be here with you today to celebrate strong women within our community. And I love the title, Journey of Becoming, the Women's Symposium. And I too would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Great Eora Nation, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and all Aboriginal people who are with us today. We're very fortunate in Sydney Local Health District to have a very long-standing partnership with the Aboriginal Medical Service Redfern, the oldest Aboriginal medical service in the country, and the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council. Together, we want to not only close the gap, but to have the healthiest Aboriginal community in Australia. And we want everyone to have that goal. And every day we are enriched by our partnership with our Aboriginal brothers and sisters. We need to think of the strengths that come from our community, not just the challenges. And we thank everyone who's in this room for all of the work you do to help us all to achieve that aim. And I was very honoured to have been asked to speak to this symposium today by the wonderful Chief Executive of Kathleen York House, Latha. Thank you so much. I feel really privileged to be here. I'd like to acknowledge the Honourable Kobe Shetty, member for Balmain, the Honourable Jenny Leong, our member for Newtown, Jess Hill, Madeline, our MC, the amazing staff and board of Kathleen York House, the friends of Kathleen York House, and current and past clients of Kathleen York House. I really want to thank Jessie, Angeline and Becky. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. You're amazing, and it's really hard to get up here after you guys spoke. And it's amazing, Angel, because kintsugi, I had to look it up because I couldn't remember it, but the art of fixing broken things, anyone who knows me, it's a bit embarrassing. I don't throw anything out. It's not that I'm a hoarder, but my staff think I am. That includes dead flowers, but I'm not Morticia. I don't cut the heads off them, but I do keep broken things and I try to fix them because they're lovely. And that art of fixing broken things, because the fact is none of us are perfect. But, you know, that liking Kathleen York House to the gold that glues us together, I think is just a beautiful analogy and absolutely correct. So thank you for sharing that with us. As everyone's indicated, Kathleen York House, operating since 1991 under the governance of the Alcohol and Drug Foundation. And how amazing was Kathleen York? Bequesting that beautiful building and providing the support to enable Kathleen House to be established, Kathleen York House to be established. And Sydney Local Health District is pleased that we continue to support the great work of Kathleen York House. The staff of Kathleen York House do an incredible job, as everyone has said, working in partnership with women to improve their health and wellbeing and that of their children. And that very proactive partnership is what is the success. I've had the opportunity of seeing the work of Kathleen York House now since 2006, believe it or not. I first became aware of the amazing work that Kathleen York House did in 2006 when I became the Director of Clinical Operations for the big Sydney Southwest Area Health Service, and then later as the Chief Executive of Sydney Local Health District. It's part of our NGO program, which is overseen by the wonderful Executive Director of Clinical Service Integration and Population Health in Sydney Local Health District, Luann Blunden, who's here with us today, together with Kim Armstrong, who's the current manager of the district's NGO program, which is the largest in New South Wales. We know our NGOs do things we can't do. Absolutely know that, and we are very, very grateful for that partnership. And that couldn't have been more evident than during the COVID-19 pandemic. And thank you everyone for pulling together and helping us to keep our community safe. The team and partners did an amazing job, particularly keeping those in our community who are most at risk safe from COVID-19 through testing, vaccination, and providing much needed support and accommodation, including the special health accommodation that was set up in Sydney Local Health District. And I'd also like to acknowledge Judy Pearson, who's here somewhere. Can't see Judy. Oh, there she is. Judy, who is the General Manager of our drug and alcohol services in Sydney Local Health. And Judy and her team provide comprehensive services through our hospitals, community health centres, and in the community to address the problematic use and harm caused by alcohol, tobacco and other drugs. And as you know, that includes inpatient care, court diversion programs, community outreach programs, needle syringe programs, opioid treatment programs, outpatient medical services. And we are very proud of our pregnancy and parenting support programs, keeping parents and their children together, and our withdrawal programs. And those services work absolutely in partnership with community representatives, our other government and non-government organisations like Kathleen York House, to address community concerns in drug and alcohol use. We've heard a lot this morning about the amazing work that Kathleen York House does in relation to supporting women who are working to overcome substance dependence problems. We know that many of these women have babies and young children in their care or wish to have children restored to them, and we want to keep families together. We know that most of the women that come to Kathleen York House are victims of domestic violence, and we know that domestic violence touches so many people, people within my families, people within your families, and the need to make sure that we have better and more robust services for women who are victims of domestic violence is really absolutely essential. And I think everyone in this room understands that. We just need to get everybody else to understand it. We also know that 25% of the clients of Kathleen York House are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background. And as I said, it is wonderful that Kathleen York House prioritises our First Nations people. The services that are provided by the Kathleen York House staff are just so critical, as we've heard, and being able to address the negative impacts not only on our women but on our children. The value cannot be underestimated, and that's why we continue through New South Wales Health and Sydney Local Health District to contribute over $500,000 through our ministry approved grant scheme. But we know that there is more that needs to be done. The program, as Lath has said, is amazing, so I'm not going to go through all of the detail that everyone has covered again. But I just want to stress that Lath indicated to me that Kathleen York House might be a small service, but it aims high. And today's symposium, hosted here in the beautiful Parliament House, I love the refurbishment, celebrates this, and it raises awareness of those issues that impact women and the challenges and transformation that strong women face. And considering the theme of the symposium and just taking Lath's advice, I thought that I would take the opportunity to share with you a little bit about my journey and the lessons that I've learned along the way, if that is okay. So the first one is about the fact that change is inevitable. Nothing stays the same. And whether it's in our lives, our careers, our organisations, our communities, we will see change. And so too is adversity. Everyone in this room has faced adversity. Often people say to me, I don't know why my life is so different to everyone else's. And the fact is we don't know what other people are facing. You know, we have a domestic violence counsellor in Sydney Local Health District that's actually for our staff, because we know many of our staff are victims of domestic violence and people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to tell people about it. So we felt that it was really important that we had somebody there for our staff. And I do think that adversity is there. We all face it. And how we face it is the thing. And when you look at these three amazing women, you can see that they have tackled adversity front on with support. We can take adversity as obstacles that stop us from doing what we want to do, or we can take it as a challenge that we can overcome. And we've seen three amazing women who've overcome that for the benefit of themselves, the benefit of their fabulous children, and very much for the benefit of us in the community. So thank you. I also think another lesson is about being optimistic. I think when we see adversity and we see challenges in our life, we really need to continue to be optimistic. And my grandfather, who died when he was 95, best death ever, I'm going to have the same one. My grandfather was incredible, and he kept talking to me about the power of positive thinking. He was a countryman. He actually collected eucalyptus leaves to make eucalyptus oil, and his brother was a timberman, and In fact, he built my grandmother's house, the whole house. He milled the timber. It didn't cost a lot, but it's a great house. But my grandfather gave me a book when I was 8 called He Can Who Thinks He Can. And he said that if we do that, it will hold us in good stead. That if we think we can't, we never can. And so we have an obligation to ourselves to think that we can make change and positive change. And you've just heard wonderful stories of positive change. Another lesson for me has been not being afraid to change direction. You've got to do what feels right for you. And sometimes we think we know where we're going and then it changes and then we think like we failed. But the fact is we're on a journey and that's okay. Life is never nice and straight. I know Kobe and Jenny might have had a plan to go one way and things change and then you end up somewhere else and you end up in Parliament House. It's John Lennon said, life is what happens when you're busy making plans. And I have to say, I didn't plan to be Chief Executive of Sydney Local Health District. I actually planned to be a maths master. I love maths. I know all of you in the room love maths, I hope you do. And I wanted to do pure mathematics, be a maths master and teach everyone about the joys of maths. But right at the last minute, when I had to sign the little form, I decided I didn't want to do that, which was much to my horror, my mother's horror, because she all her life wanted me to be a maths master as well. So in the end, I actually studied speech pathology, which was one of the most wonderful things. I love being at uni and I love doing speech pathology. And then I became a speech pathologist at Liverpool Hospital, which is really quite funny because I only applied for one job. I don't recommend doing that, only applying for one job, but that was the job I wanted. So I thought I had to get that one, which luckily I did, probably a little unwise, but it was fabulous and one of the best jobs I ever had. Wonderful people, wonderful community, doing amazing things, particularly with parents. And while I was at Liverpool Hospital as head of speech pathology, I actually finished a PhD in linguistics, which was looking at the efficacy of early intervention with infants at risk of communication impairment. And I developed a program called Learning to Communicate, which is all about teaching parents the amazing things that their children do and how they can create a positive and supportive environment and how they can celebrate the amazing things that babies do. And that program, even though I'm a chief executive, is still being used all over the world to support parents and their children. And I'm really proud of that. That actually formed part of the sustained home visiting program that's actually used in many parts of New South Wales and Australia. But I think one of the things is also being not afraid of taking opportunities, and they often present to us when we least expect it, and often when we don't believe we're ready for it. And we need to trust those people who are around us, those staff within the wonderful Kathlean York House. You know, you need to look at what opportunities will face you so that you can continue to grow and develop and support our community in lots of different ways. And I've had lots of acting positions, haven't had an Oscar for any of them, but they've all taught me a lot of things. And many of those opportunities, as I said, have been when I least expect it, and sometimes I haven't wanted it. When I was made acting general manager of Liverpool Hospital, I said, no, I'm not really wanting to do that. The then chief executive said, I don't recall asking. We actually need you to do it. It's really important for the organisation. Might not be where you think you're headed. I thought I was going to be a clinical academic in speech pathology, but there was another plan. And he said, sometimes you have to do what is the right thing, and the right thing mightn't be what you think is the right thing, but what the organisation or what the community might think is the right thing. So please don't be afraid of opportunities. Take them, because every time I've taken a job, I've gone, no, I'm not going to like this. And then I find that I really love it. And that's a really important thing, is that I think we all have to love what we do. And I can genuinely say that every job that I've had, I have loved. Not necessarily right up front. Sometimes I've gone, oh my God, what am I doing? And often, as I said, it's been a surprise to me how much I've loved it. When I was at school, my grandfather, who was a very cool person, he took me with him to clean the local shopping centre. So he retired from doing the eucalypt oil and then he started cleaning the shopping centres. So I was his right-hand man and I admit it, initially it was for the money. I did it. But I really loved working with my grandfather and I really loved getting to know everybody because, you know, I'm a bit of a chatter. I love hearing everyone's stories. So I got to know everybody in the shopping centre, which was great. And I really get a great sense of satisfaction out of cleaning things. So that was really good. But I think one of the things for me is that if you don't love what you're doing, then you need to find something that you do. And sometimes it's the little things in what you're doing that you really start to love. And that's really important for us in our own self. You know, we are worthwhile and we deserve to be happy. And I think health workers deserve to be happy. The staff of Kathlean York House deserve to be happy. And you have to find things that really fulfill you and feel good about that. You're allowed to do that. And as I said, and if you're not happy, then it translates to the work that you do. You know, in health, we want our staff to feel really happy and fulfilled. It's not easy. Working anywhere in health, working in Kathlean York House is not easy. But there has to be some joy in there. And the joy of seeing your clients succeed, the joy of being able to interact with other staff and your clients, those wonderful children, that is what makes a difference. And that then takes me to the importance of relationships. And I think, you know, I'm lucky I grew up in rural New South Wales. So when I go to Taree, I walk down the street, it takes me hours because I see everybody and I have to have a natter. But that sense of community and sense of everyone looking out for each other, I think is really important. I remember when I was younger, my brother had nephritis. And so being from the country, we had to come down to Royal Far West at Manly. And again, that was an environment where the staff created a really lovely home environment for us kids as well as my mum. And my mum was ever so grateful that she had that support to help her through that. She was a single parent. It was really hard for her, but she did such a great job. And then just as my brother Frank was on the mend, of course, then I got rheumatic fever. And so I wasn't able to walk for about 12 months. It took me ages to learn how to do it. You know, I was in a wheelchair for quite a while. My mother was amazing because she thought that I should be cared for at home rather than in hospital. So the whole community came and helped. All the neighbours came over, everybody came and supported us. We lived in a Housing Commission house. All of the people around us in public housing, they were all there for us. But those relationships are really, really important. I have to tell you a story. I know that I'm running out of time. But I think that if you have family, and family doesn't have to be people who you're related to. Sometimes your family are your neighbours, they're your friends, they're the people that you meet in the services that you have. But it is really important to collect those. I think for me, though, one of the things is about looking after ourselves, our health and well-being, thinking about doing things that are going to make a difference. I too have a dog, Katie. She's wonderful. I don't know what I'd do without Katie. I walk her every day. I talk to her about everything. She's really a child, not a dog. But it is really very important, I think, that we take that time to walk, to eat well, to look after each other. And lastly, you might have read, don't believe everything in the press, but I have been offered and I've accepted a new job, which is to be the Chief Executive of the new Single Digital Patient Record Authority, Implementation Authority. And this is to provide one single electronic medical record across 280 hospitals and community centres in New South Wales, which will be wonderful for Kathleen York House and be wonderful for everyone in our community, because that means no matter where you go, you don't have to repeat your story 5 million times. And our aim is to link with primary care and others in the community. So hopefully that will help everyone. But I do feel really honoured to be here today. I really want to take the opportunity of thanking all of you for partnering with Sydney Local Health District. I know you will continue to do that. We love that partnership because we believe together we can do anything, and especially making better outcomes together for our patients, their families, our clients and the community. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. We have some wonderful flowers for you. There's so many beautiful things from today, but what's ringing in my ears is together we can do anything, and it's true. It really is true when we get together and stand for something. So speaking of standing for things, the Honourable Jenny Leong is about to come and speak with us. Look, I could be reading people's bios all day, and I've chosen not to do that because it would be 9 hours of bio reading, but you should know everybody that's spoken is knock your socks off brilliant, okay? And then you can read the details on Google. Jenny Leong.
I would strongly advise everyone not to Google my name. It's some people like to troll me, people like me on the internet. So I'd encourage you to find out about me other ways. It's lovely to be here. I'd like to acknowledge that we're here on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay our respects to elders past and present, recognising that always was and always will be First Nations land, and acknowledge that the New South Wales Parliament is part of an ongoing colonial project that saw First Nations people displaced from their communities, and recognise that the struggle for ongoing justice and for treaties for First Nations people continues. And I think when we're talking about the intersections of gendered violence, of drug and alcohol challenges, of women and the patriarchy and the lack of funding care systems in our community, then recognising the absolute need to support First Nations people, and particularly recognising the staunch First Nations elders and women warriors that have joined this struggle for so long, is something that we all must continue to do. And I acknowledge any First Nations people that are here with us today. As my Greens colleague, Kobe Shetty, who Kathleen York House has the privilege of having as their local member, said, it's very challenging to be here on a parliamentary sitting day because we're in and out of chamber all the time and everyone's quite distracted. But one of the things that it also does is it sharpens your mind quite significantly to the fact that we are very close to where the decisions are made. Sadly, the conversations that happen in the chamber, and I'm sure Kobe will agree, are not the kind of conversations that are happening in here. Very rarely do you hear conversations about how we ensure people are looked after or cared for or get what they need. Very rarely do we hear conversations about how we're ensuring that everybody has the support and the care and the services that they require. Instead, what we hear about is all tight budget situations. You know, we hear about the need to be fiscally responsible. We hear about the need to, if the federal budget last night, we don't hear about it in this chamber, but in Canberra, you hear about the need to put $2.6 billion into submarines just for the next year alone. Now, I don't know, but I have never, ever met a woman who has come to me and said, I think the highest priority for me right now is to see $2.6 billion spent on nuclear submarines. To be honest, I've never actually seen a man that said that, but, or a non-binary person. In fact, I have never seen anyone suggest that that is the highest priority. I've never seen a poll that suggests that. What we see is that sadly our parliaments and those that are the decision makers are so caught up in preserving their own sense of power and responsibility that they have failed to realise that first and foremost, as elected representatives and the government of the day, they should be responding and looking after the people that are most vulnerable and in need in our community. That actually most of us are privileged and lucky enough to not need help all the time. But we don't know when we might need that help. We don't know when it might be us that requires it. And I can't stop while I was sitting down here looking at that beautiful photo, because the photo itself to me just absolutely captures the critical connection between a mother and a daughter, and why it is so essential that in providing support and healthcare and community services to a woman, that the idea of separating and segregating them from their children would just be so unacceptable. In providing help and support, we can't also cause further harm. And we absolutely know that those things are interlinked. Just like we know that there are women in our prison system that actually should be at Kathleen York House and are actually in our prison system because we take a law and order approach to drug addiction and alcohol addiction as opposed to taking a health response to that. We criminalise these things when actually what we should be doing is giving the Sydney Local Health District more funding to make sure those people are supported. We police those things and put people in jail. And the idea that we are not looking at how much it costs a night to put people into prisons and have women in prisons in this state, and what that money could be doing if reinvested into amazing support services, women, domestic violence refuges, drug and alcohol support services, but also to employ community support workers that actually are there to provide the help to women and families in their homes. I think it's absolutely critical to look at the fact that we are in an environment right now where the men have just, and apologies to the allies in the room, but it's like the men have just woken up and noticed that there's this thing called domestic and family violence. It's like they've just noticed that gendered violence is a thing. It's like they haven't been paying attention to the last spike we had when we all marched for justice. They haven't been paying attention when the United States elected Donald Trump after he said the most horrific things about women in the US. They haven't been paying attention for the years of misogyny and injustice to women that happened before that, the unequal pay gaps, the fact that women working in services like Kathleen York House and childcare services and community support services and nursing and healthcare are usually underpaid more than all of their male counterparts with similar levels of education in male-dominated professions. It's like they haven't listened, and right now they seem to have woken up. And that's a welcome thing. But can I tell you what's going on in there right now? They've woken up and they've gone, wow, this seems very serious. And so, to be honest, they didn't say that. That's not a direct quote. They've said, this seems very serious. We must do something. So what do? They don't listen to the Alliance of Women's Safety Organisations in New South Wales that set out a plan for all the things that are required to address gender-based violence. They don't listen to the calls for integrated support. They don't listen to the calls for the intersection between the fact that maybe your tough on law and order drug response is causing women with addiction problems to be homeless and put themselves in more risky situations, and the fact that you have a 40,000 person waiting list on the public housing waiting list means that anyone that is homeless can't actually get a home, and then you're somehow taking their children away from them because they don't have a stable place to live. They don't seem to listen to any of that intersection. What they decide to do is say, oh, look over here, there's the police and we need to recruit more police. So just now, I've just seen on my social media, the New South Wales Premier has put a call out to say we're going to make it easier for police from other states to come to New South Wales because we've got a police shortage. Because actually the solution here is we want to pay more cops. I didn't see that in the list of demands from the women's safety organisations. I haven't heard that from the list of demands of survivors of drug and alcohol support. In addition to that, they want to change the bail laws, they want to strengthen the judicial process. Now, sure, those are worth looking at. But the reality is that they're not the highest priority that everyone's asking for. The sector, and we know that Kathleen York House is one of the many, many amazing community and health organisations that work locally, are constantly saying, look at us, this is working. Thank you to the three of you for sharing your stories. It was so amazing to hear, and the level of hard work that looked like you could go through and talk about was critical. And I really like to hear you be able to say that you learnt to be worth working on was just so powerful. Yeah, that you were worth working on. And I think that you're willing to put in the effort. And what's so shameful about successive governments is they haven't been willing to put in the effort to actually shift the agenda and make the change. Unlike when the pandemic hit and no one knew what the fuck to do about COVID and everyone panicked, right? Because we didn't know. Unlike that, we know how to solve drug and alcohol addictions. We know how to ensure that women are not locked up in prison when actually what they need is healthcare and support. And we know how to end gender-based violence. Because the other day, and I know that you're going to hear later on from others, including, I believe, Jess Hill, and Jess Hill was here the other day speaking as well. And she said that we need to start positioning women's refuges as the first level of homicide prevention. That actually it's not more cops on the beat. It's actually the amazing, caring, welcoming women that treat you like family, your chosen family, that bring you in, that don't judge you, that help you and look after you and advocate for you and help navigate a system that is so broken so that you can repair yourselves. And that to me is what is so critical here. That to me is what we are pushing as our agenda, and the Greens stand with you as allies in that push. I know we have allies across the political spectrum when it comes to this, but what it takes is courage and bravery, not from the people who work in this sector, not from the women who need help from Kathleen York House. Everyone here is already well brave enough. Like actually what it takes is courage from those people who want to have a simple solution, who think that passing one law in that chamber just there is somehow going to change the culture of violence and inequity that women have faced for too long. And that's not going to happen. It's going to be really, really hard work, and they need to work on themselves more than any of us in here need to work on ourselves. And so I thank you all for being part of being here today. I want to acknowledge Latha and the amazing team at Kathleen York House for all of the work that they do. And I want to also acknowledge the contribution that everybody makes in a sector that is underfunded, underpaid, and not resourced adequately, because it is absolutely clear that everyone goes absolutely above and beyond to make sure that people get the help and support they need. So I wish you all a very wonderful afternoon. And can I say, if I could transport all of us in there to make the decisions and pull them all out here, I would absolutely do that. I'm Jenny Leong, the member for Newtown. It's lovely to be with you all.
We are ready to change rooms at any moment, okay? We're ready to go. We're ready to go. All right, we are going to, thank you, Jenny. We are going to now take a 15-minute break and grab something to eat and have a cup of tea and hopefully meet each other. And then we will come back and be ready to go at 3:40. Okay, please be back here at that time. Thanks. Today, we've already heard from some incredible women, and we are now going to be joined by another extraordinary woman who's written 13 books. That kind of blows my mind. 13 books. Will you please welcome Jane Caro? By the way, we will be giving you an opportunity to ask Jane questions. So if you haven't taken the chance to write one and would like to, you've still got your envelope and you can bring it down the front. Otherwise, I'll do an Oprah run with a microphone. Okay? Please, Jane.
Oh, I want to see you do the Oprah run with a microphone. Thank you so much for asking me to come and speak this afternoon. I've had the privilege of visiting Kathleen York House recently, and in fact speaking to some of our speakers who told us their amazing stories of triumph previously. So I'm extremely impressed with the service and also the simple, basic logic that when a woman is a mother, any health care she gets needs to take that into account. And it strikes me as quite extraordinary that Kathleen York House is the exception, not the rule. After all, I wrote an article after I visited Kathleen York House, which was in the Saturday paper. If you don't subscribe to the Saturday paper, please do so. Now, this is partly entirely self-interested because I write for them on occasion, but it is also an excellent paper that gives you really well-researched, long-form analysis of what's going on. We don't get that much in our mainstream media anymore. Most of our mainstream media are pushing very conservative agendas. They're doing the rich man's job. That's not what the media is supposed to do. The media is supposed to hold the powerful to account. Tragically, I don't think that occurs very much in this country anymore. And we're also losing social media, which, with all its faults, used to do that when media fell down on the job. But the Saturday paper does do it, so please support it. Anyway, I wrote an article in the Saturday paper, and as a part of that article, I did some research. And one of the things I discovered, of course, and when you think about it again, it's basic bedrock logic, that when a woman who is struggling with some form of addiction becomes a mother, she has a powerful incentive to want to overcome that addiction, a particularly powerful incentive and reason to change her life. Yet, that then becomes the biggest barrier for her getting that help that she needs. Now, I'm sorry, some of you may think, as I get called on Twitter all the time, that I'm biased against men. Men made these decisions, not women. There were not women sitting around the tables when those decisions were made, and if there were, there was one of them or two of them, and that's not enough. We know you have to have 30% of women to make any kind of a difference in decision making, because then they can support one another. Which, contrary to male opinion, women do. They support one another, and they always have. That is why in patriarchy, which has been going on for at least 2,000 years, women have managed to survive and managed to stay sane in a society that regarded them, and said so openly when I was a girl. I remember being told by generally extraordinarily stupid boys that women just weren't as intelligent as men. And I remember looking around and thinking, Jesus, they must be bloody dumb then. It was just accepted opinion that women weren't clever, women weren't smart. And we absorbed that. We internalised that lesser view of ourselves. We didn't do that because we're weak and stupid. We did that to survive. We did that to survive. And even though we've had probably about 50 years of second wave feminism, we are still internalising that message. And we have to actively fight to turn that around. I mean, most of the women who came up here said, I had no self-esteem. I thought I wasn't worth working on. Well, that was the normal female position for thousands of years. People were openly disappointed when girls were born. Never mind, better luck next time, you'll have a boy. 30 years of change does not overcome 2,000 years of people being disappointed when you were born. In many countries in the world, people are still disappointed when a child is a girl. Just look at what happened in China with the one-child policy. So let's not make any mistakes. Gender prejudice is real. Gender prejudice is pervasive. Gender prejudice is why services like Kathleen York House have to beg for the crumbs from their master's table while we give, as was pointed out by Jenny Leong, $2.9 billion to submarines that will be obsolete by the time they're built and of no use at all. And I'm sick of it. I was sick to the back teeth listening to the budget. We just had another seminal moment about domestic violence against women, fatal domestic violence against women. 28, I think the current numbers are, women have died at the hands of intimate partners in the last, since the beginning of the year. 28! Yes, the numbers are disputed. Some say 31, some say 28. It depends on how you define it. I'm going conservative, just for that. Nothing else. And there was an opportunity. There was an opportunity to really make a difference by giving more money to frontline services. Instead, I'm afraid, what did our federal Labor government do? It repurposed a policy from Scott Morrison's government. Now, Scott Morrison, as we all know, was a champion of feminism. I believe he said to the women who marched for justice that we were very lucky we weren't shot with bullets. Well, no one could dispute that point. We were, I suppose. It could come to that. Recently, in legislation in one of those American states that ends in a vowel, you know, the Alabama, Arizona, Ohio, they all end in a vowel, weird, wacko talk with a really long kind of accent states, one of those. They were arguing in the legislature, and I promise you this is true, how many organs a woman could lose before her condition could be considered life-threatening and so could receive an abortion. Yeah. Yeah, not Florida, though it does end in a vowel. But it could be. Next week, perhaps they could bring that one up. So we are really facing a scary time. To be a woman in America right now, particularly a woman of colour in America right now, is to be staring down the barrel of a possibility of another Trump presidency. That's terrifying. To be the parent of teenage girls anywhere in America under a Trump presidency is seriously frightening. And don't think Trumpism can't affect us here. And why is this happening? It's happening because women actually are joining together and speaking up and making the point that we are 51% of the population, and that really what affects us, what affects our safety, what affects our ability to avoid poverty as we age, what affects us and our ability to raise children in a proper way, to have a house over our heads and our children's heads, not to end up living in our car when we're over 55. Those sorts of things shouldn't be a nice to have an add-on, we'll do it if we can afford it, ladies. They should be first priority. I'm sick and tired of us coming last, of us being considered the abnorm. I read an extraordinary statistic today. It made my hair curl. It was quite a funny article, but actually when you look at the statistics, it was terrifying. Apparently in France, they've done some analysis of their car accidents, and they've found that 84% of fatal car accidents are caused by men. Now, just for a minute, imagine if those statistics were flipped and they came up with 84% of car accidents, fatal car accidents are caused by women. We would be banned from driving. There would be no debate about it. We would simply be told, look, there's the proof, you're shit at driving, you're banned, you kill people. And we would accept that probably, partly for internalised misogyny reasons, but partly because, good point. But no one's even bothered to say anything about the fact that it's 84% of fatal accidents are caused by men. We just don't even think about it being that way around. We don't even like to look at those statistics. Yes, I am an angry old feminist. On Twitter, they call me, what do they call me? Bitter, A bitter, twisted, dried up old hag. That's the comment. I always respond by saying bitter? No, not really. Twisted, according to my Pilates instructor, definitely. Dried up, yes, and what a relief that is. Old hag, working on it. Because that also reveals the way so many men think of what it is just to be a woman, a terrible thing. And what it is to be an old woman is an even more terrible thing. None of those things are true. But we are punished for being women. And we are punished if we fail to live up to what are impossible ideals of womanhood and particularly motherhood. Mother's Day makes me sick. Sorry, I know lots of women hate it that I say that. But it does, because it's such a sop. We go through 364 days of the year doing absolutely nothing for mothers. Finally, childcare workers in the last budget are going to get a pay rise. No one said how much yet. The mere fact that they were going to get a pay rise made some childcare workers cry. They didn't even know if they were getting 50 cents or $10 more an hour. I don't think it'll be any more than that, do you, realistically? No, we just give crumbs. They cried. Just because somebody said we're going to give you some more money. That's so unusual. And, you know, we absolutely make clear in our society what we value and care about by how much we're prepared to pay them. And think about feminised professions. Australia has one of the most gender segregated workforces in the world. 60% of us work in industries that are dominated by one gender or the other. And this will shock you, but those dominated by men are much better paid than those dominated by women, which is one of the main reasons we have such a big gender pay gap in this country. Almost all those gender occupations that are low paid are caring professions. So they're people who work at Kathlean York House, they're people who work in health, nursing, they're teachers, they're social workers, they're aged care workers, they're childcare educators. They're those people who we found out in COVID actually keep our society running. Commercial bankers, not so much. We could do without them. Couldn't do without couriers. Couldn't do without retail workers, or as it turned out for weird reasons, toilet paper makers. But we especially couldn't do without nurses, teachers, childcare workers, aged care workers who really went above and beyond. During COVID, the Morrison government, this is almost impossible to imagine, took 1 million people out of poverty by raising JobSeeker. And then, because Australia can be uniquely cruel sometimes, once COVID had gone, we sent them right back into poverty again. Why didn't we raise the rate in the budget? I mean, $300 to people for their electricity will make a big difference to people who are really doing it tough. And that makes that part of it a good thing. Rent assistance, a good thing. Paid parental leave, superannuation on paid parental leave is a fantastic thing, and I've been advocating for it for a very long time. So I'm not saying everything was bad, but if you think about them, they're small things. The money, the $300 going to Gina Reinhardt to ameliorate her energy bills, gains nobody nothing, not even Gina Reinhardt. And frankly, that money could have been much better spent. There are much greater needs in our community and we are not doing anything about it. I'm going to stop after I've said this and then you can ask me lots of questions, and please do, I love questions, that's when I learn things. I had an epiphany a while ago when people used to ask me, define feminism. And I used to say, like most people, it's about men and women being equal. But now I think it's something different. There's a great book, I recommend you read it. It's by Hugh Mackay. It's called What Makes Us Tick. And in it, he lists the 10 desires that need to be met to live a satisfying life. And he says they're in no particular order except the first one. which is the desire to be taken seriously. And my view of feminism now is that feminism is the age-old fight by half the human population to be taken seriously by the other half. Every time we're given the crumbs, every time we're told that our safety doesn't really matter or not enough for us to spend real money on it, every time we, get platitudes instead of action, every time we're asked to accept lower money and pretend the wage gap doesn't exist, every time we're put down, sneered at, when Hillary Clinton was pilloried from here to next week and, oh my God, she sent her emails from the wrong server. Can you imagine anything worse? He said you could grab it by the pussy and no one cared. No, boys will be boys. That is not taking women seriously. That's what feminism is. We're going to have to fight for it. They're never going to do it on their own. They've never given us anything. Not the vote, not equal pay, not sod nothing. We fought for it every inch of the way. And we're going to have to fight for our safety, and we're going to have to fight to get taken seriously. And we're just never going to have to give up fighting. And we have to do anything we can from this distant outpost to make sure someone like Donald Trump never gets to be the most powerful person in the world. Okay, I'm shutting up. Ask me questions.
All right.
Patricia has a question.
Patricia, I'm running. Hang on, let me do the Oprah run for you.
Regarding the $300 electricity handout, if anybody really doesn't need it, and I'm one of those, I don't need $300, can we start a platform that says if you don't need it, we give it to our favourite charity, KYH or your favourite charity. But what I'd like to do is for that to be accountable. So could we start an app?
There's actually Denise Chazelle. Denise Chazelle just put a tweet up a couple of hours ago on Twitter saying, I'm going to give my $300 to a community group that are activating for a teal in an electorate. People should do the same if you don't need the $300. And I quite like her idea of not giving it as philanthropy, but giving it as politically active because the teals really scare all the mainstream parties, including the Greens, because they are completely out of the box. They're a phenomenon pretty much only in Australia, this community grassroots, female-driven. I think every single teal at the moment is a woman. And they are advocating on action on climate change, integrity in government and safety and equality for women and respect for women. One of the major things we could do is support teals with that $300 and in your own electorates, because the major parties have got it all sewn up. They won't change until they start to realise they lose seats if they don't. Mind you, the Liberal Party seems to be proving that even when they lose seats, they don't get it. Oh, geez, why'd all those women vote against us? I don't know, guys. Maybe ask a few. Another question?
Anybody else? Question?
Go on. I've stunned you all into silence.
How often do you get to...
There's one.
Here we go. I was going to say, don't even get to ask a bit. What are you, twisted?
Bit of twisted, dried up old hag.
Yeah, how often do you get to ask one of them?
That's right. I should start a society.
I'm doing the Oprah.
Excellent idea, but I think maybe a listing of appropriate charities that do the work dead on could be another alternative to that app. I would support that. So you know exactly where it's going to your cause and a range of cause for these fields. Put forward a range of projects and organizations that the direct funding goes to an outcome.
I think that's a great idea, except I am a bit over philanthropy. I know philanthropy is important, but I'm actually sick and tired of philanthropy doing what governments should be doing. I'm sick of, all our fundamental situations in society having to turn to The whim of charity. It's people say to me, oh, you know, we should have charity for kids. No child should rely on charity to get a decent education. That should be a right. So we need to be careful about philanthropy. Philanthropy is great, but it's the icing on the cake. It should never be the cake. We're a prosperous community. And we can make choices about what we fund. We could choose not to have submarines and instead fund public schools to full funding. Because that's another bleeding sore in our society, that we're creating an intergenerational underclass via our education system, and we're using public funding to create that intergenerational underclass. And that will be a legacy of this generation that will spoil our future, all our futures. I don't care where you send your own kids, you can't isolate them from the fact that we are less equitably educating our children than the rest of the OECD. We now have the second most socially segregated education system in the OECD. That is unbelievable. That's on class, social class.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. Here we go. One more question after this, so prepare your hands. Who's the last person? Hello.
Hi.
I was going to touch on the intergenerational trauma aspect of it, and as Lata pointed out before, the challenges for women with children to detox so that they can use Kathleen York is an absolute problem, and I see it all the time that there's just a gap somewhere that just doesn't get fixed. As you say, women just don't get taken seriously. No. And this is future generations that we're talking about.
We're also moralistic, and we're more moralistic about women than we are about men. So women who suffer with addiction problems and who are mothers are very harshly judged because we dislike, when I use we here, I'm using it in a very general sense, as a society, and this is ancient old stuff, we dislike the idea of women and pleasure. We're very, very suspicious of women enjoying themselves. One of the most subversive things you can do as a woman is have a heck of a good time and not allow anybody to disapprove of you for doing so. Because they'll want to. They'll want to, especially if you're a mother. I used to love the Bad Mothers Club. I don't know if it still exists, but when I was a mother, I remember one woman who made me feel so much better about my parenting. She said, do you know what I do when I get my kids ready for swimming? I realise I didn't take the swimming costume out of the bag from the last swimming lesson, so I take it out and I swing it around my head a few times and then I put it back in the bag. And I loved her. That's what I did from then on and felt quite virtuous. I'm a good mother. I swing it around my head a few times. And when they fuss, I go, it's just damp. Get over yourselves. It's smelly. So are you. No one will notice. Have a good time and tease your children, give them a sense of humour, for God's sake. Do we have one more? Take us seriously. We don't have to take ourselves seriously. There's a big difference. It matters.
Oh, I think you've got to end on that. That's like the T-shirt, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, take us seriously. We don't have to
take ourselves seriously. Exactly. One last thing I'd like to say. Somebody said this on radio once. I've never forgotten it. It was in response to a budget and I thought it was so wise. They said, when a government is in surplus, a community is in deficit.
Thank you so much, Jane. All right, we are lucky enough now to have a taste of music therapy by the beautiful Julia, who is making her way onto the stage. Please welcome Julia.
Just give me 2 shakes here just to put this little PowerPoint up. I think that was the thing making the noise at the beginning of the session today, so my apologies. I do like to make myself well known, being a music therapist. I like to make noises. Where is it? Just give me a second, sorry. Come on. All right, lucky last time, otherwise we'll just... there it is. Beautiful. Ah, where did it go? All righty, fabulous. And wonderful. Can I get you all to stand? Please stay standing. Wonderful. Ah. 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 Please stay standing for a little bit longer, not for the whole time, I promise. Before I go on, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we meet today, the Gadigal people, recognise that sovereignty was never ceded, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Thank you all for waiting for that little technical hitch, for following my non-verbal cues there, and for singing. You sounded beautiful, fabulous. I did that as an opportunity for us to get up and get some blood moving and shake any cobwebs out that we might have. Singing also encourages us to breathe a little bit deeper into our lungs. We go through our day shallow breathing a lot, and so singing encourages us to get more oxygen in. It also activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us to stay relaxed and helps to lower any stress hormones. So for you, it was an opportunity to shake out some cobwebs, have a bit of a sing. For me, just secretly, with that nervous system thing, it was an opportunity for me to get rid of a couple of nerves I have standing up in front of you all, so thank you. You can sit down in a second. I just need to ask 3 questions. My first question is, that singing thing we just did, please remain standing if that's something you enjoy. Singing in the car, in the shower, whatever it might be. Grab a seat if singing is not your bag. It's okay. That's all right. And for those still standing, I'm not going to make you sing a solo anytime soon. It's okay. For those still standing, please remain standing if you've heard of music therapy before. And if you haven't, grab a seat. Oh my gosh, there's quite a few of you who have heard of music therapy. This is not just because you're reading it up here. Okay. I knew I could count on the Kathlean team to still be standing as well, so thank you. My third question is, please take a seat if you think that you need to be musical to benefit from music therapy. So sit down if you think, I can only get something out of this if I'm musical myself. We have very smart people in this room. You are absolutely right. You do not need to be musical to benefit from music therapy. You're the winners. I don't have any prizes. Grab a seat. Thank you. So, as you may have guessed, my name's Julia Hawkins and I'm a registered music therapist. Can you hear me up the back if I... Beautiful. I want to give you just a really quick 60-second snapshot about music therapy before we jump in, because we're going to have a group music therapy session today and I'm so excited. So music therapists, we are university trained. At the moment it's a 2-year master's program in music therapy, and we are also registered with our peak board. And we use music therapy in a really wide range of areas. We work with premature babies all the way through to people with dementia or people in palliative care. We work in the prison system, in the education system, in the healthcare system. We work with neurodivergent people. We work with people with mental ill health, people with disability, And you guessed it, we also work in the area of alcohol and other drugs, and I have the absolute pleasure of going to Kathleen York House every Wednesday to do music therapy. It's my favourite time of the week. And Lata, I'm not just saying that wherever you are, I'm not just saying that, it is absolutely my favourite time of the week. We use music to work on non-musical goals. So that's a really important point. It's not about, we're not music teachers, it's not music for fun, although sometimes it is fun as a byproduct, but we're working on non-musical goals. So it might be around someone's speech and language, or their physical functioning, or their cognitive functioning, or their emotions and mood and emotional regulation, or their trauma processing. And we do it using music. Surprise, surprise. We might be writing songs, we might be listening to music, moving to music, playing instruments, relaxing to music. How many times can I say music in one sentence? Quite a few. And that's the kind of thing we do. And today, in the next probably 10 minutes, I reckon, we are going to do a couple of things together in this group music therapy session that we're going to have. So we are going to sing a song all together. You sounded beautiful before. I think that you can do it again. And the song that we are going to sing, drum roll, is, thank you, is one that we have written ourselves. Now, panic not. We're not going to write a song from scratch. What we're going to do instead is some lyric substitution. So we're going to take a well-known song and we're going to swap out some of the words to make it more meaningful to the reason that we're here today, thinking about people in recovery, thinking about the journey of becoming. So we're going to swap out some of the words and make it our own, then we're going to perform it. Sound okay? So the song that we are going to take is Beautiful by Christina Aguilera. It's an oldie, but a goodie. I hope that most of you know it. I'll just give you some guidelines before we crack on. So first of all, we can keep as many of the original lyrics as you like. We don't need to change every single word. Secondly, the words that we do change, they don't need to rhyme. It doesn't need to be grammatically correct. I'm not going to submit this to ARIA at the end of the day, unless it's absolutely fantastic, and then maybe I will. Thirdly, we're going to do this all together, and we're going to go line by line. So please be brave, call out if you've got a good idea, or raise your hand and let me know. And then I'm going to, hopefully, I'm a little bit scared to touch it actually, but I'm going to type out the changes. So we have our new lyrics up on the board, and then we're going to sing it. Are there any questions? Making sense? Oh, okay, all right. Oh, I'm feeling nervous. Let me see. Okay. So, that first line, every day is so wonderful, and suddenly it's hard to breathe. How can we change that? What could we say? Be brave. Do we want to keep every day as the original lyrics and change something else?
I don't know what we're trying to say.
What's that?
I don't know what we're trying to say.
Thinking about the journey of becoming, the journey of recovery. Every day I feel it could be.
That recovery is so wonderful.
Recovery is so wonderful. Thank you. Okay.
And someone said in one of the talks this morning about learning to breathe again.
Okay, thank you. Recovery is so wonderful. And suddenly I'm learning to breathe. I can breathe, and suddenly, thank you, I can breathe. Thank you. My touch typing skills. Okay. And the recovery is so wonderful, and suddenly I can breathe.
Learn to breathe. Learn to breathe.
To breathe. Now and then I get insecure from all the pain, feel so ashamed. What could we change here? Recovery is so wonderful, and suddenly I can learn to breathe. Now and then yes.
What if it's, you kept that bit, now and then I get insecure, because that's everyone.
Yes.
But instead of from all the pain, from all the change.
From all the change. Thank you. Feel so
Strange.
feel so
Strange.
afraid. Feel so. Are we happy with afraid? Yeah. Or strange? Feel so strange. Okay, recovery is so wonderful, and suddenly I can learn to breathe. Now and then I get insecure from all this change. Feel so strange. Yes. Verse done. Chorus. We are beautiful no matter what they say. Words can bring us down. What would we like here?
We are strong.
We are strong.
We are worth it.
We are worth it. Can we have, we are strong here. Can we have, we are worth it down here? Ha-ha. We are worth it. We are strong, no matter what they say. Words can't bring us down.
Men can't bring us down.
Men can't bring us down. Oh my gosh, it's taking a turn. I love it. We are worth it in every single way. Are we saying the same thing?
Yeah.
Yes. Men can't bring us down.
It's not men, it's the patriarchy.
The patriarchy can't bring us down. The patriarchy. Patriarchy can't bring us down.
It's too convoluted.
We can make it work. So don't you bring us down today.
What if you change patriarchy to naysayers?
The naysayers. The naysayers can't bring us down. Can't bring us down. Our last line, so don't you bring us down today?
Yep.
Beautiful.
Something about taking things seriously.
So
So take me seriously today.
take me seriously today. Ah, this is fabulous. So take me seriously from today. All right. Shall we? Recovery is so wonderful. It's suddenly. Can we all stand up and sing our incredible new song? Yeah. Okay. All right. Recovery is so wonderful, and suddenly I learn to breathe. Now and then I get insecure from all the change. I feel so strange. We are strong no matter what they say. One can bring us down. We are worth it in every single way. The naysayers can't bring us down. So take me seriously from today. Well,
Amazing. Thank you for your suggestions. It's just, I love it. I'm so fired up after Jane's speech, and now I feel like a little anthem as well. It's fabulous. Thank you. Look, I just wanted to quickly go through a couple of the benefits, the therapeutic benefits of what we've just done, because I'm a music therapist. So there's this really well-established link between music and the way it affects our emotions. So things like the release of dopamine. It can make us feel good. So research shows that coming together like this, connecting to music, can lower depression and anxiety and can make us lift our mood and be more motivated. Singing together is an opportunity for social connection, a reduction in social isolation. And writing, songwriting like this is an opportunity for processing, for self-reflection, and for self-expression, and also sees some rises in our sense of confidence as well. So I hope that you felt a couple of those things as we were doing that today. For the non-singers in the room, I hope it wasn't too painful for you. You sounded amazing. For the singers in the room, I hope it wasn't too painful for you. You sounded amazing as well. If you'd like any more information about music therapy, feel free to connect with me via the QR code. I thank you all so much for your participation and your beautiful singing. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Julia. I feel like we need to start making T-shirts from this event. And can't bring us down. Take it seriously. Okay. Thank you, Julia. We are very, very lucky now to be joined by someone, I'm not going to read the whole bio again, but an extraordinary writer and advocate and journalist, among many other things, whose book that you probably know is called See What You Made Me Do. So please welcome Jessica Hill. You're welcome to be here or there.
Hi everyone. I don't know how to follow those two acts, so hello. Hi. Thank you so much for staying for me, and we might go just like 5 or so minutes after 5. Is that right, Lata? Just so that people aren't like, what the? She's going so long. Anyway, so I need to get to my parking. So do I. So it's okay. I have a deterrent. So just to start with, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, the Gadigal people, and pay my respects to elders past and present. And it's such a privilege to be here and talking about the intersections of substance abuse and gendered violence, because often that kind of falls into the too hard basket, particularly for journalists covering this. It can be, victim survivors who also have substance abuse issues. It can be difficult to include them in stories, as I'm sure like Jane has experienced. And Jane Gilmore, another great journalist, has also talked quite a lot about, where you don't have the ideal victim and it's difficult to convey the entirety of their experience without invoking more stigma and shame. But it's really underdone. So I'm glad to be talking about that today. And I think that, whenever I start talking about gendered violence, I guess front and centre in my mind is the experience of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, partly because of their incredible advocacy over decades and centuries, but also because when I was writing in my book about what was our role through colonisation in terms of bringing certain dynamics to this country, we really arrived with some wicked social problems that were particular to England and Ireland. Child abuse, family violence, gender inequality, misogyny and coercive control. We imported those like invasive pests to Australia. Sexual violence has been around since time immemorial for practically every people that we have any documentation on, and it goes back, and you read about sexual violence in myths of pretty much every Indigenous peoples. But these things, misogyny, gender inequality, coercive control, that was not something that was present in Aboriginal cultures and Aboriginal nations here in Australia until we came. And I think nothing could really prepare Aboriginal people with our ancestors, I say my ancestors' familiarity with violence, deceit and power over. So I feel like the work that we're doing now is really repairing that damage, or attempting to, and creating a better future for not only our children, but especially First Nations children, and recognising that justice and self-determination are inalienable rights. And if we're going to embark on a new future for this country, we have to tell the truth about both our violent past, but also about our violent present. And we have to make visible these otherwise invisible systems of discrimination, racism, and power and control. So today, and what I'm always talking about whenever I get the opportunity is about a particularly invisible system of power and control that wasn't even codified or put into language until the 1950s. And it's something that victim survivors have long described as the worst of what they have endured, and it's what's known as coercive control. Now, I use binary pronouns in this address just for ease of reference, and also because men's use of coercive control is the most dangerous and the most common form that it takes. So in heterosexual relationships, coercive control is really a gendered type of abuse, but it also exists in LGBTQI relationships, and obviously men, women, non-binary people can perpetrate it. It follows the same architecture in those relationships. So what we're dealing with here is actually like a patriarchal dynamic in which one person feels entitled to take control over another and has power that they can leverage over that person. So every day when I do this work, and increasingly multiple times a day, I'm getting contacted by victim survivors and their families, and often they're at their wits' end and they feel like they have nowhere else to turn. And that was what drove one man to contact me a while ago about his sister-in-law, and he gave me permission to share her story. And I do that just to give you a sense right from the top about what a trap coercive control can be. So she's married with a 6-week-old baby. She's not allowed to wear makeup or choose her own clothes. She doesn't have independent internet access or control over her own phone. She's not allowed to message people. Her husband messages people on her behalf and often pretends to be her. She's banned from using social media. She's banned from leaving the house without him or without his permission. She's banned from seeing her family without him being present. The house is wired with CCTV and microphones. She won't step outside when her family does visit, and the last visit had been 18 months prior to this man contacting me. She's 31 years old. He says she's popular, funny, attractive, well-educated, loving family, and this man has turned her life to ash. Now, her brother-in-law is desperate to help her. He's documented every tiny detail that he's been able to observe over the past 7 years, but police won't help, her church won't help, the Attorney General in her state won't help. Friends are terrified and they're walking away. The system is failing her and he feels utterly helpless. And he wrote to me not long ago saying, "This is a murder-suicide waiting to happen, and I don't want to see police wringing their hands in 12 months' time, apologising for their failings." But when I get messages like this, there's a lot going on in my head aside from that sounds horrible. And the first thing that often comes to mind is what would happen to this woman if she did decide to leave? What would happen to her child? How would she reliably protect her young child from this man who is clearly fixated and dangerous? Because our systems are actually so unsuited to protecting women and children from dangerously fixated men that they often feel like they have no choice but to stay. And there's a line from this 1975 study in the United States that really captures the challenge that we're facing. And it was written by authors of the first nationwide study on family violence. And they found, very much to their shock, that 28% of married couples in America had experienced violence during their marriage. So just to put that in context, this is at a time when it was still believed that 1 in a million children had experienced sexual abuse. So you can imagine the shock that 1/3 of American couples had experienced violence in their relationship and the shockwave that sent through America at the time. And they were very stark and simple with their conclusion. They said, with the exception of the police and the military, the family is perhaps the most violent social group and the home the most violent social setting in our society. And unfortunately today that assessment stands, and despite everything we've done, some of those statistics haven't changed. I mean, we could go off on multiple tangents here and talk about the decrease in physical violence, and what we're seeing is increase in surveillance. And there's all sorts of ways that these statistics have moved around, but the prevalence of violence and control is still very high. And I think no one needs to be reminded of that this month. So, when surveyed, the statistics that we know is that 1 in 4 women will say that since the age of 15, they've been subjected to physical or sexual violence from an intimate partner. So that's 2.3 million women. And statistics also say that as many as 2 in 5 kids, so we're talking 40% of children, are growing up with domestic and family violence. So that's around 2 million kids. 1 in 7 men will experience physical violence from a partner. And that data's, a bit more complex to unpack because some will be physical aggression from a primary aggressor, but much of that violence will also be from victims who are fighting back or defending themselves. But that stat equals about 800,000 men. So all up, you're looking at more than 4 million Australians who are directly impacted by coercive control and violence. But what about adults who grew up with family violence and coercive control as kids? If we take that 40% figure as a guide, we have several million Australian adults whose life trajectories were significantly impacted and redirected by the abuse they went through in those formative years. Now, we don't actually count perpetrators. We can't even really approximate their number. So we can presume that if many will victimise more than one partner, it's not just 1 for 1. So it's not 2.3 million men to 2.3 million women. So let's say we have at least hundreds of thousands of perpetrators. And then, of course, we can't just add all those numbers together and get a sum, because children who grow up with family violence or other types of maltreatment may end up being victimised or ending up as perpetrators as adults themselves. But if we're going to be super conservative about people in Australia who've been directly harmed by family violence, we're talking at 5 million at the very least. That is an astonishing percentage of our population. So with that in mind, consider that line again, that with the exception of the police and the military, the family is perhaps the most violent social group and the home the most violent social setting in our society. Now, for many, that idea is actually almost impossible to integrate. I'd suggest probably not for this room. Others know it in their bones. And really, over the past, I'd say, in Australia particularly, over the past 3 years or so, women's rage over this particularly, and the myriad ways they are targeted and endangered, exploded onto the streets and was really, at the last federal election, driven home with laser-like precision at the ballot box, as Jane was indicating earlier. But like all revolutions, this was really in our minds before it was in the streets. And I think what we are in the middle of, and I think it's been happening since the early 2000s, since victims of church and institutional child sex abuse came to the surface and started to be listened to, I think we're in the midst of a really seismic shift, and it's actually totally unprecedented in Western history. And that is that victim survivors of sexual violence and family violence and other types of abuse, they're not just being heard, they're actually being, in some cases, feted as icons. And I can say, I was with Grace Tame on stage a couple of years ago at the Adelaide Writers' Festival. I'm pretty sure she was Australian of the Year at this point. And it felt more like the big day out. And that does not happen often at writers' festivals. I get a good turnout sometimes. Jane gets a good turnout. But there were 4,000 people crammed into the Pioneer Gardens. Literally, kids had come, they'd wagged school to come and listen to her. Teachers had wagged school. They came over to the signing desk and said so. And they were crammed onto every available patch of grass to hear Grace speak. Maybe a few of them came from me, but I'm just, yeah. Anyway, now I'm not suggesting that we've obviously, banished the old era in which victim survivors were pathologised, blamed, disregarded and disbelieved, because Brittany Higgins has been on the cover of Marie Claire, but she is certainly not experiencing anything like iconic status amongst the broader population. I think she's iconic amongst the few of us who know. So jurors still remain so reluctant to believe rape victims that rape itself is essentially all but decriminalised. But we are seeing a new era in which these victim survivors and like a broad cross-section of victim survivors who, in terms of what comes to the very top and the very surface, they are still predominantly white. They're still predominantly attractive and able-bodied, but they are being imbued with this sort of unique power and recognised for their wisdom and expertise that has come via that experience, and that was obviously, you know, for many there to start with. So the unanswered question remains that our imperfect victims, the ones with substance abuse issues, the ones who suffered brain injury as a result of their abuse, where do they end up fitting in with this story? And that is a longer journey to go, hopefully. Sometimes I think of these things as a long journey, and then suddenly it accelerates in a way that you couldn't have predicted, so we don't know. But because we're listening to victim survivors and actually letting them tell their stories in the way that they believe to be important, we're not just getting the blockbuster parts of their stories. So journalists aren't just doing the big, you know, it bleeds, it leads. They're also learning how trauma works. And I think finally grasping that the incident, the standout incident, if there was one, so the rape, the assault, the hit, the grope, was actually just the visible tip of a much greater iceberg. And we know that some who go through the worst torture imaginable may never experience any physical violence, and that some who are physically assaulted will say that it wasn't the worst part, or even worse, that they were grateful they were hit because it meant they had proof. And my friend Geraldine Bilston has said on the record that she was grateful that she had a bruise on her face so that she could walk straight into the bank without records and get them to gain access to her account. She wouldn't have been able to do that had she not been hit, and that's why victim survivors so often say they wish they were. And that for others, it was actually the betrayal of institutions, be it the police, the family law system, their own workplaces, that did more damage than anything any abuser could ever do, or colluded with the abuser in doing that damage. So finally, we're starting to see gendered violence as not just as a collection of physical incidents, but as a whole system of abuse, one that happens in private and it happens in public. And it's actually not just a collection of abuses, but it's a system of behaviour that ends up having the impact of entrapment. And I think entrapment is the key paradigm shift that we need to make in understanding how family violence works. And instead of asking, why doesn't she leave, which is a perfectly valid question to ask, as long as you're willing to hear the answer. But I think a more pertinent question and a more mysterious question is, why doesn't he let her leave? Especially when he seems to hate her and degrade her and humiliate her on a daily basis. So I came to this subject really knowing next to nothing about it. I didn't even think I'd know anyone who had been through it. And hasn't that been a steep learning curve, including some family members who I did not even know of coming and telling me in signing lines at book festivals. That's a whole nother story for a memoir that I will write in 30 years, when some family members are not around anymore. So I knew when I was first asked to write about this for the Monthly in 2014 that it was important. So they asked me to write it after Luke Batty was murdered in Melbourne and after Rosie Batty rose to particularly state prominence at first. She was yet to be made Australian of the Year. But to be honest, when I was asked, like literally the last article I'd written for the Monthly had been on the gold plating of the poles and wires and on how the electricity system works. And I've often suspected, but never quite had these suspicions confirmed, that the editor thought, well, electricity is pretty complex to explain. Maybe she should have a go at family violence. And I'm going to defame myself here and say that my thought process was something like, how am I going to write 4,500 words about a guy going home drunk on a Friday night to beat his wife? So it was pretty unreconstructed 70s analysis that I had in my head. And I am being a bit unkind here, but mostly to make a point that in the minds of myself and I think of most Australians, domestic violence in 2014 was predominantly defined as physical. And then there were other types of abuse that you might also say is psychological, emotional, probably wouldn't have thought about financial at that time. And if it's any indication of how naive I was, a year into reporting on this subject, I wrote an article headlined, "Everything I Thought I Knew About Domestic Violence Was Wrong." And I did that really purposefully, partly to say, like, I'm not coming down from the mountain with a stone tablet as if I'm Moses and I've been given the word. Like, I have had to come through my own personal humiliations to realise how wrong I've been and how I did not even have the right questions in mind when I started. And I think it's important for people who are new to this subject not to feel like they should know. The fact that you're interested is great, and let's find out. It's exciting. And, I hate to say that, but I am fascinated by this topic. But it is exciting to know what you don't know. And that's what draws me on 10 years later. And I think thanks largely to the victim survivors and frontline workers, particularly, who educated me, I went from seeing coercive control and family violence as a collection of abusive incidents to an unrelenting system of abuse with one end in sight, and that was entrapment. So abuse is simply the means to the end. The end is entrapment. And to entrap their partners and families, perpetrators follow a plot line so predictable that once you know it, you can basically finish a victim's story before they're halfway through telling it. And it's so predictable that when victim survivors get together, they marvel at the similarities, and they'll say things like, did our guys go to TAFE or something? Like, how do they all know to do the same thing? And I mean the same thing, like what we're finding out with the 1 cent transactions, being used in banks to communicate abusive description fields. I sat with survivors in Bendigo at a refuge, and one person raised the fact that she used to get kicked out of bed in the middle of the night and be kicked onto the floor for no apparent reason. 3 other women in the group, including the refuge manager, said they'd experienced the same thing. And why? Because their perpetrator had been stewing for hours while they'd been asleep on some, perceived infidelity, perceived disrespect, and then just lost it and kicked them out of bed. So coercive control is really powerful as a concept because it's the model for understanding what that typical plot line looks like. And victim survivors will often say that when they hear it explained, it's like this light bulb moment, especially for those who never thought of what they went through as domestic abuse because they were never physically assaulted, or maybe they were only rarely physically assaulted. And in fact, most coercive control victims actually don't know they're being abused, partly because they're made to believe that they are the crazy ones and they are to blame for what is happening. So the plotline will look different in every relationship, and sometimes I make a crass allusion to romantic comedies that, you have different plot lines for romantic comedies, and Matthew McConaughey will feature in one and Adam Sandler will feature in another. But, essentially, the bits. There's going to be an arc that is followed. And it's similar with coercive control, that you'll see the same basic architecture that is definitely adapted to the individual relationships. So coercive controllers will typically isolate their victims from supportive friends and family. And when I'm talking about the adult victim, I'm also talking about the children who end up getting isolated from their friends and family. They deprive them of basic needs. They may constantly accuse them of infidelity and other betrayals to pressure them to prove their loyalty. They ring and text relentlessly. They micromanage their behaviour. So they set rules about what they can wear, who they should see, what they should cook. They monitor them through online communication tools or spyware. They intimidate and belittle them. They set rules intended to humiliate and degrade them and then establish clear consequences for breaking those rules. They may threaten the kids or enlist them as co-abusers. They threaten or actually harm the family pets, particularly if they want to show what they're capable of. And they also want to cause harm and hurt to their partners and children. They destroy household goods, and they make it abundantly clear that if you ever leave, there will be dire consequences, which may be a threat to harm themselves. And suicidality is a real red flag for future homicide risk. Now, sexual violence is really common, and in fact, whether you can actually give consent to someone who's using coercive control against you, I think is an unresolved question, because in that environment, how do you give consent, an honest consent? But we see reproductive coercion commonly, threats and coercion to be filmed having sex, to have sex with others, to watch and reproduce acts from violent porn. Physical violence is common. It can be sadistic in its extremes. But it's really important to understand that in coercive control, it's not necessary. That the coercive controller only needs to establish the believable threat of violence to keep the system in place. And in fact, 30% of domestic homicides between 2008 and 2017 were committed by what the researcher Haley Boxall termed fixated threat offenders. So mostly middle-class men who used high levels of non-physical coercive control, who planned the homicide for weeks, months, who predominantly killed their partners after they left. And these men were much more likely to try to conceal their crimes and plead not guilty. Now, when you're trying to subordinate your partner, there's really actually little more that's effective in doing that and effective in setting an entrapment for them than financial abuse. And actually, when you look at statistics, I think the Australian Institute of Criminology found 47% of women who said they'd experienced coercive control said they had experienced physical violence. So 47% had not experienced physical violence. That's a substantial minority. It's almost half. But when you look at financial abuse, you're looking at upwards of 80% of women experiencing financial abuse. So when we're thinking about coercive control, we actually have to upend what we think are the most prevalent forms of abuse that go to establish coercive control. And research has shown that there are common themes in financial abuse, which is interfering with a woman's ability to be employed, preventing them from having money, setting like punitive allowances, refusing to contribute to household bills, creating debt for which women are liable, problem gambling, siphoning funds off somewhere to be hidden, and lots of other ways, deception, fraud. I think post-separation abuse, you see people's coercive control actually emerge after the separation happens, where they try to siphon off money and hide it to prevent their ex-partner from getting the money that they deserve. So all coercive control can happen to anyone, and we know that that's been established. It cuts across class, but it does affect certain groups of people at far higher prevalence than others. 16 to 24-year-olds are the highest risk age group. The Australian Institute of Criminology found that in 2020, the rates of coercive control were highest for women identifying as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, women who spoke a language other than English in the home, and women with a long-term health condition who needed daily assistance, which is not surprising. That's the same risk factors we've seen for physical and sexual violence as well. But people and women who use substances are also at higher risk for being subjected to coercive control, and people who are subjected to coercive control are at a higher risk for abusing substances, so 6 times higher than the general population. And that's because many women who are using substances or abusing substances in a coercive control context are doing so to try to dissociate from the pain of the abuse and the entrapment they're experiencing. Now, obviously, substance abuse can predate the coercive control relationship, or it may be a result of it. And there's some really excellent research that was put together by the Gippsland Family Violence Alliance that showed that while some survivors use substances to cope with the traumatic effects of entrapment and abuse, others are actually coerced into using substances by their abusive partners. And more to the point, many report being punished by the controlling person for trying to seek help and give up substances. So an American survey from 2014 found that of 3,200 respondents, a quarter said they had used substances to reduce the pain of the abuse. Another quarter had been pressured or forced to use alcohol or other drugs, or made to use them more than they wanted. More than a third had received threats to report their alcohol or other drug use to someone in authority to prevent them getting help that they needed. And of the 15% who had tried to get help for their substance use, the majority, around 60% of those, had seen their ex-partner or partner try to prevent or discourage them from getting that help. It's useful for a controlling person to have their partner abusing substances. It debilitates them, it makes them more dependent, it is maybe useful into coercing them into sexual practices against their will, even into sex work against their will. It makes it so much more difficult for them to go to authorities, and that's especially true for Aboriginal women who already have a well-founded fear of child protection removing their kids. So the controlling person can justify their abuse based on the use of substances both to the victim and to authorities. And that's particularly to family and criminal courts. They can claim that they're just doing what they have to do to manage their partner's addiction. Now, the language of coercive control, and I guess an increasing understanding of how we understand it, is really recent. And when I first released my book in 2019, there was actually virtually no understanding of coercive control at all. When I mentioned the term, aside from in the sector and actually in the courts, the community, there was no recall at all. And I think it was in February 2020 when a personal trainer in Brisbane named Rowan Baxter murdered his ex-wife Hannah Clark and their 3 children by dousing the car in petrol and setting it on fire and then killing himself. It was one of the most shocking family homicides this century, and even more so because prior to murdering his family, Rowan's abuse was not characterised by physical violence, but he did tick all the boxes for coercive control, and he is a typical fixated threat offender. So since then, and thanks, largely to the advocacy of Sue and Lloyd Clark and many others like Nithya Reddy in New South Wales, coercive control is now a subject of intense public interest, and Jane Carey's even written a book about it. And we've got, television series like Safe Home. There's a lot of cultural products being produced now about coercive control. And that, I think, is only set to intensify. We've got New South Wales and Queensland that have criminalised coercive control. So those laws will become operational in New South Wales on July 1 and in Queensland in 2025. And in Queensland, the change to the laws is considered so significant and regarded as such a fundamental change to the system's response. It's actually supported by a suite of accompanying reforms and a funding package of over $360 million. Now, for anyone who lived through the debate over criminalisation, it was certainly at times divisive and difficult and strained. And while Labor ministers Linda Burney and Anne Ali were actually among the first politicians to advocate for criminalisation, it has since drawn criticism from some groups, especially those that serve and represent First Nations people. And their concerns are really important, and I think it's made the laws better. I think we've now got an implementation task force. There's a 2-year review to see whether any unintended consequences are stemming from the laws and to make changes at that point. But their concerns are that we shouldn't bring in laws if they lead to more victims being misidentified as perpetrators, and nor should this just be another tool for police to use to persecute First Nations women and men, and particularly in regional areas where there's a real disparity in terms of persecution. And there have been other valid questions, like why add a new law when police can't even reliably respond to physical violence? And all of that is valid. There is no point in just simply adding another law to the books. And the only reason to consider criminalising coercive control is also to entirely reframe the way our systems respond to domestic abuse. And it's a profound shift because it's moving away from an incident-based response where you'd go to court and you'd have just one piece visible, like he broke a laptop. You wouldn't hear any of the context around that. Or worse, you'd hear she threw a phone at him. Why? It didn't matter, because all we're looking at is the incident. Why we were advocating for these laws is that we need police and the courts to do much more work around setting the context around what incidents mean and how high risk they are. But it also needs to be done with great care. And in Queensland, there was a task force, which I just cannot rate highly enough as a model for how to do this, the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force. It was led by retired Judge Margaret McMurdo, and it set out to discover how best to legislate against coercive control. And after over 500 submissions from victim survivors and more than 200 from the sector, 125 meetings all over Queensland, the task force delivered more than 80 recommendations to government. They set a 4-phase reform plan, and criminalisation was the last step. The safety of First Nations people was prioritised, so the first recommendation was for the government to co-design a strategy with First Nations people to address the overrepresentation of their people as offenders in the criminal justice system. There was also a Royal Commission into cultural issues within Queensland Police as a result of this report. There are recommendations for education and training, early intervention, deterrence programs for first-time offenders, expanding behaviour change programs across the state, and rehabilitation and monitoring for offenders. So to properly respond to coercive control, every system will need to adapt. And I think that for me, I didn't set out, when I wrote the book, I wrote one line at the end of one chapter, which said, it's time for us to criminalise coercive control. It wasn't even a major part of my book, but it just seemed like it caught this public imagination, partly because of the murder of Hannah Clark and her 3 kids and the advocacy of her parents, but also because it became so clear that we weren't capturing the whole system of abuse in our criminal justice system, and that was a real problem. So look, I would love to go on for half an hour longer, but I won't because you guys need to go. So I just think that in terms of when we're working particularly with women who abuse substances, the likelihood that they've experienced some form of family violence in their past is so high. And that may be continuing to influence how they use substances, whether they can recover, especially if the perpetrator is still somehow in their lives or trying to be. It's just so important that we see the totality of their experience, that we acknowledge the ways in which they've tried to resist, we acknowledge their dignity and the ways in which, if they have children, they have tried to protect their children. That is what, really expedites recovery. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I actually do think we could listen to you for half an hour easily. Easily. Thank you so much for your time. We're actually not going to do a questions and answers right now, but I think Jess will be here momentarily if you want to grab her on the way out. And we have flowers for you, Jess, which I'm sure will be shared beautifully with Stevie.
They'll probably go in your room. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Who would you want us to phone? Patricia is just going to. Patricia Cake is part of the board for Kathleen York House, and she's going to close our amazing symposium off. Thank you.
What an afternoon. 3 words stand out for me, and I'm sure they will for you. Connect, learn and share. These women that we've had today, including our speakers and our guests, have just been amazing. I have never felt so more proud of being part of ADF New South Wales Kathleen York House. I'd like to start off by saying thank you to the Honourable Kobe Shetty, especially for bringing up the expansion of Kathleen York House, which is uppermost in our plans. The Honourable Jenny Leong, the most refreshing MP I've ever heard. If she was in Bayview, I would vote for that lady. And I'm a bit of a staunch righty. Dr. Therese Anderson, congratulations on the new job. And I loved your quote, "You want the best death like your granddad." I think that's a wonderful recognition of your grandfather. Jane Caro, what can I say? I loved her gender violence rendition. I haven't heard it put before. It's imported like invasive pests. I think that will be forever in my memory because that's so true when you think of our multicultural society. Julia Hawkins, I have to say I cannot sing a note. I love the way that you got the words, and that's a beautiful song that I think we can take up and work on as a theme for Kathleen York House. Madeline, Jess Hill, Jess, your violence and the way you've let us know your deep understanding of the problems, if only you weren't the Prime Minister, because you should be. Madeline, I'd like to recognise your fantastic MC steering job. She kept us all involved every step of the way. I'd like to thank my board that I'm part of, Gilbert Whitten, who isn't here today. He's in the health section, so he's working like he is. Graham Yates, Janet Dawson, and Lorraine Plant, our treasurer, is not here today. But they're very supportive of LATA and Kathleen York House. Staff, we've all said that staff is amazing. We honour them. We're so proud of what they do for us every day. And when the pandemic was here and we said, look, we want to stay open 24/7, they did not flinch a hair. They were there on rosters and whatever needed to be done, they were there. So Kathleen York House stayed open 24/7. I'd also, this is really special. Our ladies, our lovely ladies who've come through the program, and a husband who's supported her today. Well done. They have a bridge to cross. They're the only ones that can cross it, but we can show them where the bridge is, but we can't cross it with them. I love the words that came out from each of you when they were told by Kathleen York staff, you're worth working for. That gets to you, doesn't it? That stirred them on. One of them said that we get 200 calls a day for people to come in. And one of the ladies said, it was the worst day of my life, but the best when I came into Kathleen York House, and that we had given them a new life. The gold vessel. I hadn't heard that before, but that's a wonderful quote to bring up, and we'll work on that. Another lady said Kathleen York House held her and got her son back. As a mother, we all know what that would have been like. That would have been euphoric. Homelessness is the biggest problem for people coming to Kathleen York House. Most of the majority have been homeless. There's nothing worse than being homeless. Living in a car, and we've now got someone giving $300 to everybody and sundry, but we've got these people living in cars. I'd like to leave by saying the lady who said she walks past Kathleen York House every day since she's been. She still lives in Glebe and she walks past Kathleen York House every day. Isn't that a wonderful testament to the work that we do? One last job. I'd like to congratulate my colleague, my friend, Lata. This is her baby. She has put this together. And I have to say, you've dedicated 11 years of your life to helping women and children. Thank you, Lata.